My name is not Barry Cranford. My name is Anthony, and I'm here today with the aspiring speakers community. The reason of existence of our group is to basically take speakers from couch to conference. And it's a small, cozy community completing 6 years. Lena was one of our first mentees, went to the Vox in one of the first years of our conference. And well, we're all about like public speaking, but writing is part of life in that world as well, right? And lots of our members wanted to get started, either blogging or like they want to write a book or just get good at it. And I went asking some of the best people that I know, and for whatever reason, they decided to come here. So I'm going to get out of the way and let Barry, Donald, and Vaughn introduce themselves. This is a QA panel, right? So if you have any questions about speaking, just either type in the chat or raise your hand and we can you can ask directly, whatever works for you, right? And yeah, that is it on my side. So without further ado, let's maybe do this in alphabetical order. Let's start with Barry here. Barry, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, Anthony. So just a short introduction then, I guess. My name is Barry O'Reilly. I'm here, I guess, because I've written a couple of books. I'm an architect and a researcher, and I've written a couple of books. One is called Residues, which some of you might have read, Time, Change, and Uncertainty in Software Architecture. And the other is quite a strange book for the IT industry. It's called The Architect's Paradox, which is a sort of parallel story of the history of Western philosophy and the development of the philosophy of software engineering. And I'm an architect, researcher, teacher, speaker. Based in Sweden, but you would never guess that from my accent.
It's great to have you with us, Barry. Thank you very much for coming. How about you, Don? How are you today?
Very good, thank you. Yeah, so I guess I'm a little bit earlier in the day. I'm out in the US, so it's a little after 2 p.m. for me. So yeah, I guess myself, also an author. I have one book that's been published. Also a contributing author to another book. Some folks may know it's called 97 Things Every Java Programmer Should Know. I've been speaker at various conferences since 2010. I think was the first time I did any public speaking. I'm an active blogger. I've worked in financial services for about 25 years now. Also worked in technology and healthcare prior to that. And in case anybody here will recognize the name, so I'm a former small talker from the 90s, and you know hey, Vaughn.
Whoa.
And that has a lot to has influenced me quite a bit in my career. So, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Don. Always great to have you here. So from one small talk fan to the other, how are you today, Vaughn?
Doing all right, thanks. I'm even earlier in the day than Donald. I'm in Arizona, and just for your information, because it's interesting, Arizona does not change time zones ever, so we're perpetually on Mountain Standard Time, and that means that currently we are on the same wall clock as LA, like California, West Coast. So um, for a short time in the winter when we have, I guess, not daylight savings time, standard time everywhere, we're on the same time as Denver, in case that um, interests you. So I find it kind of interesting. But um, so You know, one thing that I kind of dislike is that I become known as an author. Um, I am an author, but I consider myself a software developer, and I have been for, I think, 43 years. Um, so just because maybe you hadn't heard that I developed software before you read one of my books, if you have, um, I'm a software developer first, okay? And um, and I take a lot of pleasure in software development. So, and I also wrote two books before any books of mine were published. I wrote a book in, it was like 1987, along with a co-author. The name of the book was The Advanced C Programmer's Guide to OS/2. Now, if that book had been named The Advanced C Programmer's Guide to Windows by Microsoft Press, you would have probably heard of that book. But Microsoft was at that time in a partnership with IBM, and I was asked to co-author a book with a very respected and well-known author at the time because I knew Unix internals, and that could be of help to him in writing about OS/2 internals. But because maybe you have never even heard of OS/2, you would not have heard of the book. But yeah, anyway, you could look up the history on that. I abandoned a second book because I realized that the scope was far too large, which is something that I have a bad habit of getting into is projects that are just way, the scope is just way out of hand, and I think it's going to be manageable enough, but gladly I've bailed out in time for to avoid some of those mistakes. Um, so I am the author of 4 published books. My first book being known as the Red Book, domain-driven, implementing domain-driven design. Another one that you may have heard of is Domain-Driven Design Distilled. And my most recent book is Strategic Monoliths and Microservices, which um, addresses monoliths and microservices as architectural approaches for strategic software of any kind, right? So what is the most practical? The subtitle probably explains more. It's um, um, using purposeful no, driving innovation using purposeful architecture. So that that's the extent of that. Why did I start writing books? You can ask me that later. I'll stop talking now.
It's always great to hear from you as well, Vaughn. So, just a reminder, there is no structure here, so everyone feel free to ask questions in the chat or raise your hand, but I'll get everyone started with, well, we're all tech architects and technical leaders and software developers. So my question is, what sort of madness came upon you and that you decided like writing, blogging and getting finally to like writing a book? What was like, what pushed you into doing that? Oh, no order, just just take your pick.
Yeah, Saurabh this side. So, hello, Barry.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for being here. So, I'm very excited to start my journey to writing a book. I start writing some technical specification, technical documentation, and I'm preparing myself for writing some short notes and all. And it brings something like that when I was preparing myself for more leadership role, and my coach always says that why you're writing like a author, you are not preparing your project profile like you are writing a book. Focus on that, how you're presenting in a leadership. That nudge me in that, like, shall I proceed this further in my life, to write a book which is more simplifying Java design patterns, and helping other people who are learning React and TypeScript, but they struggle to identify that how it fits into the Java. So it give them more easy way to understand new complex or some different language topics. So that and keep encouraging me, but I'm struggling how to kick a start and how I can be on the track for writing a book. I'm trying to do this, but keep failing. So seeing your profile and learning from you guys that how you are writing frequently and some of the things, right? So in this way, I can get more encouragement and direction so that I can write it out.
Yeah, I think I'll weigh in, I guess, Anthony, to your question, how I got started writing. I actually started writing when I was in high school. I started writing poetry, and I submitted poetry like 3 years in a row to my high school literary magazine. And what's interesting is when I started programming professionally, and I was programming all through high school, various languages. The interesting thing I realized, and it's just, I think everybody should realize you're actually writing all the time. Like I started feeling like my writing bug find its way into emails that I would write. And I sit there painstakingly worried about like this email that I'm crafting and who my audience is and what they're going to take out of it, right? Maybe far too much time into an email. But it was like years, many years, maybe even decades later, where I finally got the inspiration to start writing publicly and doing public speaking. If I had to look at it, like I wish I had started doing it 20 years earlier. I started, my career in the early 90s, late 80s, and it wasn't until 2017 that I started blogging publicly, right? And I would say like encouragement to folks who feel like, they don't know how to get started or whatever. I got started very late in life, right? It's like, in my 40s, really found the ability to, write. And there's a lot that goes into, you're putting yourself out there. You're worried about if you're in a full-time job, well, you've got to follow whatever work policies that you have in terms of writing, right? So there's like overcoming that. But for me, it was like finding, in a lot of ways, finding myself. It's like, hey, I had this writing bug back in high school and I kind of lost it, right? It's like the only writing I would do is in source code, right? And I'm speaking to the compiler, but also speaking to future developers. They're going to come along and read it. And I wanted to like have very, well-written code, not a lot of comments, but just code you could read because it's well written, right? But you have a very limited audience there, right? So I don't know, 2 cents I figured I would throw in there.
Good.
May I make a contrasting comment
Go for
or
it.
whatever? So in school, I hated English. I did not write. I'm by nature a horrible speller. I'm a very slow reader. I think I'm dyslexic probably, but I've never been diagnosed, but like anyway. And and when I read, my mind tends to drift. So because I think of things that the reading makes me think about, and I can read 3 or 4 pages and realize I don't remember anything that I just read, and I have to go back. And so that's me. And I when I was a senior in high school, I was um, helping out fundraise for something. I don't really even remember what it was exactly. But what I would do is use my excused absentee pass to get out of English class because I absolutely hated it. And even to this day, I still have nightmares of walking into class, English class, toward the end of school and realizing that I have a test or some report that was due or something like that, and I, it's scary. Anyway, and I already told you why I wrote my or helped, I co-authored my first book was because I was asked to. I really never thought of myself as an author, and when um, I heard, I met this guy in a contract that I had, programming on Unix, and and we were both hanging out in the library reading stuff, and he introduced himself, and we got to know each other, and I don't know, maybe 6 months later, he said, hey, I've got this offer from Microsoft Press to write a book, and would you co-author with me because I think you could help? And I find out that it's this code-named operating system called 286 DOS, and that code name changed to OS2 later. Again, maybe you've never even heard of the operating system, but it was a actually very well designed operating system, way better than Windows. And the API, right? Yeah. So anyway, that was my first entry point. But then when Microsoft broke up with IBM, and they became, well, they were probably always enemies, but frenemies. And then, but then they just became, pure enemies. And our book was canceled. It was completely, first draft, ready, actually in review. We wrote a lot of cool software. I actually wrote a desktop app using all the operating system deep ICPs and interprocess communications. Today you would call those, queues, semaphores, blah blah blah, right? And it got the attention of Bill Gates, and he said that is not going into our book because it was going to compete with the presentation manager. But it was character mode, right? Because we didn't have, our book was not about graphical user interface. It was, character mode was part of the OS, not part of the, presentation manager or Windows over top. So that's the most that Bill Gates ever knew of me. But our book got canceled anyway. Actually, strangely enough, Addison Wesley acquired the rights to the book, but themselves never published it because OS2 was essentially a failure. So there. Then why I finally published a book is because it was eating at me for ages that I put so much work into a book and it never got published. And I also am good friends with a very, at least on the Windows side of, Windows side of things, the author of Inside Windows NT, and he kept badgering me, why haven't you written your book yet? Why haven't you written your book? And he's very successful. Um, and so, yeah, those things bothered me a lot, and I finally did. So, and then why DDD? Because Smalltalk, like the overlap of DDD with Smalltalk and the fact that Eric Evans was also a small talker, it snapped together. When I first read his book, I was like, wow, this sounds really familiar. And it was domain modeling essentially. And there, okay, go ahead, Tom.
Let's connect the dots, Vaughn. Like I
Yeah.
learned Visual H for Smalltalk from IBM on OS2 and developed in it many years on OS2. So
Okay. So I use Digitalk Smalltalk on OS2, but you were essentially using what was before known as
parts.
Envy
Oh,
Smalltalk.
NV, yeah.
Yeah, Envy, which was the coolest thing because Envy had, and that's Smalltalk Dave, right? That was his company.
Yep, OTI
Um,
Dave.
yeah, OTI Dave. And and the cool thing about Envy was you could trim the blob down, right? Digitalk, so you have this thing called the image, and everything gets packed into it, and it takes memory, right? It takes RAM to run the thing. But with Envy, they had a way of crawling the image and figuring out only the classes that absolutely needed to remain in the image, and they could clear everything else out, and you could use the extra RAM for your to run your application. And with Digitalk, we just suffered through, I think it was a 4 meg image at the time, which was enormous, right? At the time, it was enormous. 4 meg, yeah.
Good times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a book on Envy behind me somewhere over here. I think it's the only book on Envy.
I love that. I actually created for our team, I created an Envy developer knockoff, which was basically the code control, source code control thing and and changelog browser and um, packaging, the packager, right? I could actually package applications, but I couldn't, I never got to the point where I could crawl the image and remove things. I don't even know how I may have done that. But I patched, I think I got by with patching 4, you know, Digitalk level classes, right? Like the class, and so that I could um, track changes, right? When the compiler compiled things, I could tell what changed and I could mark them for source control.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying, and I want to not talk too much so Barry can weigh in as
Oh, I'm
well, but
sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
um,
Maybe we can
that
just meet
it's
another
so
time and talk
important.
small talk.
Well, it's interesting actually, I would say, and I actually have a small talk book collection behind me, and I think it's one of the we were going to get to why do I think like the most important reasons to write. It's like there's so much that we forget if we don't write it down, and it's so important to share it with others. So like everything you were just saying, it's like I hope that's captured somewhere that someone could actually read about it one day. So I'll shut up though and hand it over to Barry. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I say, like Vaughn, I hated writing in school, and my first degree was in pure mathematics. And the reason that I chose pure mathematics was because there was no essays, just symbols. And sort of much later in life, I was given a talk about 10 years ago on some of my ideas, and the head of the Swedish Computer Society was in the audience. He came running up to me afterwards and he said, "You have to write this stuff down. You can't just walk about and talk about this. You have to write it down." So he made greased some wheels. I ended up writing an article for the an American architecture journal called Cutter Consortium. And that article then got picked up by an academic conference who said, "Hey, if you tidy this up a bit, we'll publish this as an academic article." That's how turgid it was, and that got published, and that led me into a PhD program. And so for a number of years, I was publishing with two very different personalities. One in this enterprise architecture journal, and the other stream was academic writing, where I started off in computer science, ended up in philosophy, and it all got a bit strange. And then I gave a talk at a conference in Europe here, Domain-Driven Design Europe, and it's a very popular talk. And Matt Chess, who runs the conference, called me up and said, "Hey, look, every year we like to give away a book to our attendees in their little goodie bag you get at the conference. So could you write the book for next year?" And I thought, "Oh, yeah, okay, sure." And that was in like September, and the conference is in June. And so I sent Matches an email around Christmas time. I said, "Hey, things are going well. I'm on about 260 pages." And he sent me an email back. He's like, "No, stop. Wait, we meant booklet. Like we have a budget for 16 pages." Uh-oh, this is going to be tough. And I was like, "How am I going to get this down to 16 pages?" And I woke up after a conference this morning in March. Just the conference was in June, and I was in Munich. And I got woken up at 6 a.m. Before I went to sleep, I thought, I'm going to send Matches an email tomorrow. I'm going to say, "I'm sorry, I can't do, I can't go from 260 pages to 16. It's not going to, I just can't do it." And I got woken up at 6 in the morning by a text message from Lufthansa who said, "Yeah, you're not flying today. Our people have decided that this is a really good day for a strike, and good luck getting home." And so I woke up and I thought, 16 pages isn't much, and I write quite quickly. So I started just typing on my phone. And I got up, left the hotel. I was walking. I remember walking along the street in Munich, just typing on my phone frantically. Then went to the train station. I went to the airport. I sat around. I ended up getting home through Oslo, and so I left the hotel at like 6:30 in the morning. I touched down in Stockholm just after midnight, and I wrote "The End." And that was my first book, which was not 16 to 16 pages. It was 72 pages. Then we did some negotiating, and eventually that book was released. And then it was initially, I just thought this is like a trial run for my thesis. It's a way to get the message out there. So I went back to Matches. I said, "Here's the book. We'll publish it." And I started getting all these emails We'll publish it at the conference. It'll be a physical copy. It'll only be for the conference. And then, so I start getting all these emails from people going, "Hey, we heard you wrote a book. How do we get it?" And I'm like, "Talk to Matches." And then he was like, "Stop sending people to me. They have to come to the conference if they want the book." So I put it on LeanPub, where it still is today. And I woke up the next morning, and if depending on how you configure LeanPub, you get an email every time someone buys a book. My inbox was full. I was like, "What is going on?" And I'm at number one. It's like, this is completely unexpected, and that's how I accidentally became an author. And then what happened after that? I had the original 260 pages that I'd written. A whole chunk of those were on philosophy, so I took those and turned those into my second book. And I'm currently writing the third and the fourth, which is actually going to be my thesis, which will be released in the autumn.
Brilliant to hear from all of you. So, Saurav started asking a question earlier. I was just going to reiterate. He's basically trying to look for a first opportunity or co-authorship or getting noticed by a publisher somehow. I know that both Barry and Donald already spoke a little bit about this, but yes, how does one get their first opportunity? And maybe after that, Michele and Lena, you can each unmute and ask your questions, all right?
So if it's sorry, go ahead, Vaughn.
Well, you know, so again, my first co-authorship was someone invited me, and I mean, when you think about it, we barely knew each other, but he knew that I knew Unix internals. The what I did with implementing domain-driven design, the Red Book, is I decided that I wanted to author the book without having a publisher. I did not want to write a book that the publisher forced me to write. I wanted to write my book. And I had enough experience with one publisher, and I won't name them, but they're still in business. And I just, it was like their contract said, if you don't deliver a book by the time you say you are, and all these chapters like in cadence, right? If you don't deliver this, we're taking away from your royalty, which is already quite minute, right? I mean, really. And so, not that, I mean, I have never made coin off of books. You don't. So you got to get used to that in your head. But I'm still not going to work for nothing, right? You're not going to like give, you already know the publisher's going to make massive amounts of money on your book. So I just said, there's no way I'm writing a book like this because I'm going to have to write them a check at the end when I finish for them to publish my book, the penalties of the contract. So I just said, okay, I'm going to write my own book. And then when I was far enough along, I had basically had the full um, first draft of 13 of the 14 chapters, and I said, and it was actually Labor Day weekend in the US. And I got to this point and I said, okay, I'm just going to spam all these publishers online. And I will tell you that Pragmatic Programmer wrote back on Tuesday morning, so our weekend is Friday, well, Saturday, Sunday, Monday's the holiday. And Tuesday morning, I have this email from Dave so Prag Dave, and it says, we are never publishing a DDD book again. And you can look up which DDD book they published, and yeah, and you probably figure out why. But anyway, so I was like, uh-oh, this is not going to go well. And then actually not, and then I'd never heard from, I can't remember which publisher it was. I never heard from them at all. And not long after that, maybe a week or two later, I get a response from Addison Wesley, and I was like, oh, cool, like this is amazing. But the email was from Chris Guzikowski, and Chris became my editor there, and he said, but it's going to take me a while to get things lined up, so just be patient. A couple months in, I get a response from Manning, and Manning says, we're interested in your book. And I thought, wow, this is weird timing because, Chris was actually returning and saying, okay, let's move into this. And I just ended up going with Addison Wesley, which is Pearson now, but because that's where Eric's book was published, and that's where Martin Fowler's book was published, and right, so that's just the publisher that I chose, and I just kind of liked working with Chris. He's a good guy to work with. But I just spammed. So you could write some chapters. They're going to want to see sample chapters anyway. They want a proposal. Sometimes you can find the proposal online, print it, or whatever. Just take it and fill it in. Yep. And so I took it on the chin, is kind of how I did it.
Yeah, so like my first book experience was not dissimilar in that I got invited to contribute to 97 things every Java programmer should know. And I mean, there it's like I'm writing 3 pages of content basically, right? Along with up to 96 other authors. It's less because I think some people had multiple contributions, but and that was the first time I'd actually ever seen my writing in a print book outside of just being online in a blog and whatnot. And I think what led probably to that, me getting the invite, if that's what you're interested in understanding, is like, I actively blog. I've been presenting at conferences. I got named a Java champion in 2018. So I had basically been through my writing, kind of establishing myself unknown to folks who said, hey, let's talk to Don and invite him to write his book, or sorry, contribute to this book. When I decided to do my own book, I feel like, I had people telling me all the time, like, hey, Don, you should write a book. Hey, Don, you should write a book. I finally decided, okay, I'll write a book. Now I had the book I wrote was actually about a library I created now 22 years ago. It's called Eclipse Collections now. It started out as an internal library at Goldman Sachs, was open sourced in 2012 as GS Collections, and then moved to the Eclipse Foundation and became Eclipse Collections in the end of 2015. And I've been working on it now for 22 years. So I still contribute to it in open source. I'm one of the maintainers, one of 8 committers. I think I actually saw one of the other committers join the call before. So I think Vlad Zakharov is here somewhere. Who subsequently was the first person I ever did when I did my first speaking externally was, hey, there he is, clapping. Vlad and I did a talk together at the Great International Developer Summit out in Bangalore, India, back in 2010. But yeah, so getting back to my first book was, I was deciding, do I go with a publisher? And I was looking at like, the various publishers out there. I didn't, it's funny because like I have a lot of books from Addison Wesley behind me, some of Martin Fowler's and whatnot. And I looked at, Manning, just pragmatic program. I was trying to figure out like, well, how do I approach writing a book about something that I created in 2004, open source in 2012, I've been working on for 22 years. Well, I finally decided after a year of tossing about the ideas, like, I know what, I'm just going to independently publish, and write my own book. It's going to be on my timelines. It's going to be on my time frames. It's going to be on, this is what I want to write. And I, had an editor. My sister actually did the cover. She's the designer. And about well, it's funny. I like to joke. It's after 20 years of work, I finally wrote the book, right? But it was a concerted effort of basically sitting down and writing for about 20 months before, finally getting published. So, it was nice. I decided, I had the ability. I took some time off from work to do it. I'm not one of those people that can juggle like, hey, write a book at the same time as you're employed. It's like, I had to focus on it. I might be able to do it now that I've gone through the process of writing one book. I couldn't do it then. If I ever wanted to see it finished, I was going to sit down, do it, get it done, and that's it. But, finally did. So got published a little over a year ago.
Thank you. Also, I'll have Michele, which is actually a blogger, and he writes a lot of great content on LinkedIn as well. I follow. Yeah, I think he's one of the few reasons why I still have LinkedIn is Michele. So you should ask your question, Michele.
Hi, Anthony, and hi, everybody. It's really cool to see you here. I mean, as Anthony was saying, right, I do tend to post a lot, typically from, terms like almost like hip fire. I think about something happened at the job and I write about it. I'm also trying to write in long form, like a book, fundamentally because a friend of mine has insisted so much I couldn't say no. But I really struggle in terms of like trying to figure out what do you talk about and what you do not talk about, right? Because you always starting talk about something, and I'm like, oh my God, do I actually want to go in depth about an argument just so that I can make my point, or should I just assume that the reader knows about it? And I just wanted to ask, since you're very experienced, how do you find the balance between what you want to mention, what you don't?
Balance? What is balance?
What is that?
I'll just tell you, when I told Eric Evans the length of my entities chapter, he was like, "Oh my God." He was like, "Well, why don't you cut that chapter down and maybe you could just write a book on entities after that?" And I thought about it, but the thing is, I didn't think I was covering anything that didn't need to be covered, but it didn't mean that anybody had to read the chapter from start to finish, right? It was more like a reference, like, okay, if you're doing this, consider this, and that, and that's just because I feel like I'm shortchanging people if I don't tell them what I know. And so I am a bit Mr. Overshare always. I just someone asks me a question and like this, okay, so I'll stop talking, but that is my motto is just tell everybody everything you know because you don't want to like leave anything out.
I think it's interesting. I guess like for me, this works when I'm writing post or talking, like at the pub or whatever. I guess that like writing long form feels like torture, so I cannot yet bring myself to, I don't know. But yeah, I totally get the point. Thanks.
It
I'll
is,
tell
it
you.
is tor it is torture. There is like in my last book, I said in the what do you call it, the preface, I was like, a lot of people say that they want to write a book. A lot of people also say they want to dive with great white sharks. And how many actually do that, right? How many actually go dive with great white sharks? The same number or ratio or whatever who say, I want to write a book and actually get one published. So it's torture. It is absolutely torture.
Yeah, it's not an official term, but there's a lot of you are in the UK, right? So, in the UK in the 1960s, we had this massive building boom after the Second World War, where we were like building proper housing for people, social housing, and one of the common patterns in those houses is it was something called pebble dash. And pebble dash is where you just put mortar on a wall and then you take a whole bunch of small pebbles and you just throw them hard into the mortar. And some of them stick and some of them fall on the ground. And the ones that fall on the ground, you scoop them up and you throw them back even harder. That's how you do it. And that is how I describe my writing style. I just sling stuff at the wall, and what some of it sticks, and the stuff that sticks is good, and some of it will be lying on the ground. So whenever I write a text, I have the main text, and then at the bottom of the file I have rubbish bin, and it's a couple of hundred pages of just madness. And sometimes as I'm writing, I remember, oh, there's a bit of madness in there that actually would fit here, and I'll go back and throw that back on the wall. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the only thing that helps me get out of this trap is a deadline, because as you get closer and closer to the deadline, the pressure forces you to sacrifice some of your paragraphs. Like I really wanted to put this bit in because it's funny, but it's not properly polished. It's not going to make it, so I have to cut it. And that's the only way to get out of that trap, because I'm also overly verbose, and write way too much. So a deadline, like real pressure, will force you to kill your own darlings and get rid of things that you realize aren't central to the theme. And get a really critical professor to review your work as well. Someone who's going to tell you this is rubbish, this paragraph has to go. What does this even mean? Don't be so pretentious. This bit has to go. That helps filter very much as well.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Very. What was it? It was Pebble Dash? Because I want to steal this.
Yeah, yeah. Pebble Dash is there's probably a Wikipedia site on it. It's
Okay, I gotta
if
go
you're a
look.
small child and if you grew up as a child in the UK, you will at some point have fallen and gone face first into a wall with this Pebble Dash, and everyone has the scars. It's very
Yeah.
unpleasant stuff.
Well, it's funny because what I've done to myself, in some ways, it's like I nerd snipe myself. I'll start out with basically like back in the day would have been like a Twitter post. Let's say now in Blue Sky, I'll just post something, have a screenshot of some code, have some quick blurb, and kind of leave it out there. And I'm like, oh crap, now I got to write a blog about this, right? And
Yeah,
for me, the pressure is like, oh, I've thrown this out there. It's like people are going to think I'm an idiot, right? Let me actually quantify it with something useful behind it, right? So then I get to writing and usually like winds up in a very late night for me trying to iron everything out. But I think to your point as well, like I feel bad for, some of my technical reviewers of my first book. Everything I wrote in chapter one wound up in appendix. It's like, and I learned, everything chapter one, you're going to write last. You have no idea how to start off your book.
yeah.
You'll find that out later, but like, I kept generating content that would go elsewhere. It just kept going through chapter one and like getting factored out. And yeah, just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what would stick and finally, something stuck
Yeah.
together to print.
If I may, I'd like to ask Donald a question, and I'm just going to I'll make an assertion. Writing 10 blog posts doesn't mean that you can write a 10 chapter book. And I think, and I'm just going to say this because I have never written a 97 things or contributed to it, but I would say that the 97 things, if that was actually 97 chapters written by one person, you'd have to go visit them in a hospital, an asylum or something like that. And so what was 97 things, do you think simpler? I'm not going to say easy, but simpler than writing a chapter book of your own?
I mean, it was a lot easier to write the content I had to write there, right? So it was effectively, and it's funny because you can actually see my chapter, one of the 97 chapters, up at the 97 Things site on Medium. It's effectively a blog post, right? So you can read it for free. It's called Learn to Kata and Kata to Learn. But it was something, I shared, the idea with the editors, which were, I'm gonna get the name wrong. It's Kevlin, last name.
Penny.
Henny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Trisha G were the two editors for the book, right? So I submitted the idea, and it's funny because like back and forth with them on the editing process, which was amazing, right, to go through that. And there was a timeline. They, wanted to get the stuff ironed out, and I feel bad for them. It's like they had 97 or 90 something people to do that with, right, with individual content. So they were actually organizing all the chapters and the content and the ideas and editing the individual stuff. So credit to them. Here I am with this small contribution. I went through the process, but yeah, it's interesting for me writing the 10 chapters. It was like the first one took me forever. Once again, I didn't finish it until the end of the book, really. It's like, I spent months on it. Each other chapter, kind of like once I started to have what the story was, they just kind of fell out quickly, right? It was just like, sit down and write. Once I understood like how I wanted to structure things, what is the theme I wanted to hold throughout the book, like what are the things there, and help along the way for my, technical reviewers, like, hey, having something that threads each of the chapters together, right? Having a theme. It's not just this pile of text to your point. It's like, yeah, it's not the same as 10 blogs, right? These things have to hold together. It helps to have a story, right? If you're writing something like I was writing, which is effectively you could look at as a reference guide for Java collections library. It's also a story. It's like I wanted to have something where somebody could sit down and read it. And that's much harder than just saying, hey, I'm going to talk about lists or sets or maps and have a chapter to that. In fact, like it took me a few months to figure out the whole strategy I wanted to have for writing a book. I'm writing a book about data structures and algorithms. That is the most boring topic on the planet, right? It's like, how many books can you read on these things, right? And how many languages do you want to read across it? And it's like, it took me a while, but it was really in credit to Smalltalk. Smalltalk actually had the strategy I wound up using, which I don't know if you can see it here. I have my book here. Let me turn off my blur so you can actually see it. So if you look, there's a path here, and on this path, each of these icons is a category. And this is a credit to method categories in Smalltalk, which is kind of like a forgotten thing where like, hey, we can actually take the APIs that we develop and actually group the methods into categories. And this is actually really quite important, but like file-based languages don't have it. And Smalltalk just had it built in. But people that worked in Smalltalk, like myself, is like, you kind of didn't notice it was just part of what you did. You didn't think about it too much. And then it disappeared. And the only options we have for organizing are classes and packages. And it's like, yeah, but what if you have a rich API and I don't want to like, what do you do with that, right? You sort it in encounter order, in some order, you know, I have 100 methods in an API. There's no way to group them. So the book actually wound up being me understanding. And so I was actually learning through the process, like, hey, what's a way that I can teach a collections library to someone where it's got a million lines of code, you know, and it's got a very rich API. How do you teach 150 things to someone? You break it down into 9 things, right? And it's the categorization and information chunking and all of the stuff that I had kind of internalized over a long period of time. Maybe I wrote about in blog posts. It became the basis for what I then wrote about in the book. And then I don't have 97 chapters in this book. It is like 11 chapters, right? And it's like trying to figure that out. What is your content? And it's funny because like I forget, I think it might have been you, Vaughn, said that basically someone actually said to me like, hey, you should talk about how you use collections and domain. I'm like, that's a whole nother book. I wound up creating an appendix for it because I wanted to include something. It's like, how do you use collections in practice? But it's like, yeah, that is domain-driven design. Like collections are part of, you know, how we design things, right? And should be part of programming languages. But it's like, yeah, I can't, I have to factor that out. I can't do that here. I have to focus this and scope it. Or otherwise, this book would be like, I don't know, a tomb of books with like 10,000 pages, right? It's like, I'll never finish. So.
Well, the point I want to make yes, and so again, I haven't contributed to one of those books, and to take nothing away from that, it's 97 things. Again, just to be the editor or editors for that is complex, right? So, but my point is, writing 10 blog posts, they tend to be freestanding. A blog post tends to be freestanding, and you're not, generally speaking, and when I write a blog post, even if there are some related ones, I'll just reference it and say, you want to go read more about this, go over here. But you can't do that with a book. And especially if you're telling a story like I had a team working with domain-driven design, and they didn't quite understand it or didn't know it at all in the Red Book, right? And that helped, but you have to make all the chapters cohesive in the way that they need to be, but also not too much, right? And so you have to have like this vision across all the chapters, and oh, I need to go back to this chapter now and point somewhere and explain, you know, just a little bit how this ties in. Yeah, it's not 10 freestanding blog posts.
Yeah, agree.
So
And that's what people would always say to me when they told me to write a book as well. They're like, just wire your blog posts together. I was like, that sounds pretty simple, but it's not that at all.
So we are 10 minutes away. So I miscalculated. We should have like a 3 hours talk to you know those three. So I'm going to cheat a bit and I'm going to compress 3 questions in one here. And basically, and then Alex, you can ask your question as well. So I think that the summary of the best that I can do with the questions is what's your message for someone that is, doing architecture like mid-level now and want to evolve their careers in the age of AI where the folks think that you should be working, I don't know, writing Markdown to like skills and things like that, like, and we're not seeing like technical books in the shelves anymore. So, like, what is your advice? How do you write to humans? How do you take control of your career in this day and age?
My advice is from Barry, Pebble Dash. Just keep throwing against the wall, see what sticks.
Yeah, I would say for me anyway, it's very important to be authentic and to follow the squirrels in your brain. Just wherever they go, follow them. And if you're faithful to your own squirrels and not someone else's, and you're not just saying, I want to write a book because I want to be an author, but you have something you want to get out, becomes so much easier. And just follow your nose. Read a lot, and as you read, you'll form opinions, and some of those opinions are going to be different. And eventually, to get to Sebastian's question, if eventually one of those opinions will be something that no one's ever said before, and that's when you've got the right squirrel, and you just grab it by the tail and see where it takes you.
Yeah, I would say that's really good. It's funny because I wrote a blog called "The Tangent is the Opportunity," which is very much that spirit. It's like, yeah, chase those squirrels. And I described my own experience of like going from writing haiku to creating a blog post that turned into like a programming challenge that, then a developer advocate at Oracle posts, used as a video on the Java YouTube channel in Jep Cafe. And it wound up basically taking haiku that I wrote, turned it into Java, and it winds up, hey, now it's actually YouTube video seen by like 70,000 people. So 70,000 people have read my haiku. Who would have guessed if I hadn't thrown those pebbles against the wall, right? So
Yeah. Um, so I am all in on like Claude Code. I'm using it every single day. Um, and I think the reason I'm obviously biased, someone's waiting to get in, but okay. Um, I I'm obviously biased, but I think that domain-driven design is more important than ever right now. One reason for that is like Eric, very long ago would say, look, you know, the enterprise is an absolute disaster, right? I mean, I'm not quoting him precisely. I'm just, so I don't want to speak for him, but the idea was one bad programmer can mess things up more quickly than you can ever correct them, right? And that was a human. And he said, so leave all that and create a clean boundary for the differentiating, competitive advantage. And that is your core domain. But if you don't have that mindset now for almost all of your software, a bounded context for all the different things, you're going to have a disaster that no one can ever deal with. And um, yeah, so, and the other thing is, I actually should have delivered my fifth book 5 years ago. I I said yes to too many other things, and I've been paying for that ever since. But my wife of 42 years has been telling me, you need to write the fifth book. And honestly, I'm not sure anymore. I'm afraid to. I would like to get some feedback, at another time. But I'm afraid of it because I don't know if anybody would even be interested in reading it anymore. It is very domain-driven design, but the another implementation level, but at a greater, scope, much greater scope than that. But and I'm also afraid of even including anything LLM related because I don't know if it's going to even be relevant a year or two from now. I mean, will the as well as I think I'm doing with it, will it just literally explode, implode, whatever, and go away? Or one or two survivors will be charging so much money to use it that I personally will not be able to use it without being employed by a fortune company, I don't know. It scares me. And one last thing I will say, if you think you have a winning book, um, I don't know why I didn't even think about this before, but if you think you could be an author, I am the editor of my own signature series with Addison Wesley. So if you think you have something worth writing about, go read the thing. So you can go to, let me just enter the URL.
While Vaughn gets the URL, I just wanted to thanks all of the panelists here and all of the great people that we have. Alex, I'm going to let you unmute and ask the last question because I want to squeeze the very last juice of this talk.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I brought my buddy, the pink elephant, into the room. How do you tackle writer's block? My creativity does not listen to my commands. So, what are your tricks? Sorry for a tough question at the end.
Sleep and don't think about it and come back to it when later. So what I wanted to, but the last thing is read that little description of my series. If you fit into that and you really are committed to writing a book and finishing it, feel free to contact me. Please do not contact me if you're not like hell bent to do it, because I don't want to deal with it. I've had too many potential authors drag me along, and I don't have time, right? But if you are seriously like, I'm going to do this and I don't care, everything else can fall apart around me. I'm going to have a book published. Contact me.
Thanks, Vaughn. That is an amazing opportunity that you're giving everyone here. So anyone else has any other tips for Alex here before we close the event?
I would say that if you're struggling to write something, you're in the middle of something, and it's not coming, just go and read something else, and perhaps something off the wall, something that's not related to the topic, something very far away from it, and then come back to it. You might find that the squirrels meet up and take you somewhere you're not expecting.
Yeah, I think to just add to that, there was a tutorial I went to at Uppsala in 2005, and the title of it was called "Queer Can Creativity Be Caught or Taught? Can Creativity Be Taught?" And the guy who taught it, he went with the title of his title was Games Master, right? And at the conference, I remember, I think Martin Fowler actually did a example of it. But basically, the conclusion of the tutorial is you can't teach creativity, but you can basically, cause the creative juices to flow by taking focus off of what you're doing, right? Go look at other things. Yeah, whether it's reading a book, go for a walk, go for, a bike ride, hop on a plane and go on vacation somewhere, right? Do whatever it is that basically takes you from the focus. And by going out on some other different, and I refer to it now as a tangent, it's like you may actually find a better focus on what you were looking at because you've got now a different perspective to help you hopefully maybe find that. But yeah, you can't force it. It'll come when it comes. So.
All right. I wish we had another whole hour with the three of you. We'll do a small talk event. I don't care. Next time I hope that I can get you folks. Thanks very much. Thanks for everyone that made it in here. Thanks for Lena that helped me co-host. Carly Richmond, which is not here, but made a lot of the things work behind the so I couldn't be happier to have the three of you here.